Great. I just want to say hi, everyone. So we'll start in just a moment. For anyone who is currently on the call already on the webinar, I just want to say welcome. My name is Dr. Simi, Medical Director of Glycanage, and we have some wonderful guests with us today, but I'll wait a couple minutes before fully introducing them. But the aim of the session is to give anyone here who is interested in longevity, thinking about starting a practice, some insight from some experts who have been doing it for quite some time, and kind of give you their insight on what it takes to set up a longevity practice, what some of the challenges might be, and how you go about doing that. So I will give just one more minute before we start, and then we'll jump straight in. Okie dokie. So glad to be here. I'm glad to have you. Brilliant. Okay, so we are waiting for one more of our panelists, but I think we can jump straight in with a quick introduction. So as I mentioned, for anyone who wasn't already on the call, my name is Dr. Simi Oke. I am the Medical Director of Glycanage, and one of my biggest things I'm most passionate about, which we've just spoken about, as education. And what we have today is some amazing panelists who have been working in longevity, who are here to share some of their expertise and their knowledge. We have Dr. Naras, who is from Chi Longevity, who I'll let introduce himself, and also Dr. Chelsey Brown with us. So I'm going to hand over to Chelsey, if you just want to give us a quick introduction about yourself, and how you got into longevity.
Yes, absolutely. I actually think it's awesome that you introduced me as a doctor, but I'm actually a very proud registered nurse and a completely unorthodox in the longevity space. My name is Chelsey Brown. I'm a registered nurse and entrepreneur. I run a large cosmetic medical practice in Canada, and my background actually starts in the science space. I was a biologist in school first, and my first undergraduate degree was in biology, and that's where the fundamentals really started to strike me about 15 years ago. So I run this medical practice, this cosmetic medical practice, but about a year ago, I met Dr. Nicola Conlon, who respiked this interest in the longevity space for me because it had been budding in me since my early years of education. And just to sort of speed the intro up, in my biology degree, I remember sitting there and just asking all the questions that are being answered today. I remember feeling like I was a little bit ahead of myself. I remember being told, you know, these are really great questions, Chelsey. You're clearly thinking at the molecular and genetic level. There's definitely some research going on at the moment, in particular in NASA. Some of these things were explained, but it felt a little intangible. I couldn't actually reach out and grab this yet. Fast forward 15 years. If I would have just known that in the background, absolutely this research was going on, I would have kept my finger on the pulse a little bit better. And this reinvigoration of longevity science and what we can do to manipulate our genetic material, our immune system on the inside has really opened my eyes and made me extremely passionate about longevity science. And so that's what happened. I met Dr. Nicola Conlon and I started to drift my practice over to longevity science, which makes total sense. I'll explain that later. But now we're turning our clinics into longevity spaces. However, we're still very focused on the cosmetic aspect of it. And we're growing this model for longevity science. And they just kind of melt together so perfectly. That's my story. I'm super passionate, and longevity is my future and really the future of medicine.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chelsey. And thank you for correcting me, actually. I think that's a no, it's a really important point, actually, that I think sometimes this space can feel really, really intimidating. And actually, we, as a band of practitioners, you know, people who are interested in health, who are interested in pushing forward that agenda, need to come together. And it's not just about doctors or nurses. In fact, anyone who's in that healthcare space, I think, is very welcome into the longevity arena. And I think we all have a really important part to play in helping push the agenda of longevity, but also preventive medicine, which kind of is what longevity is about. But I'll pass it on to Dr. Naras to give us his story.
Yeah, so my interest in longevity medicine sort of began a little over 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I was not that young anymore. I was an ex-research scientist. I'd had a career in sort of academia. I'd gone and then done a master's degree. After all of that, opened up a practice called the Body Doctor, because I actually didn't want to work in research anymore. And as the Body Doctor, I was a consultant dietitian. But even back then, which is more than 18 years ago, I was seeing people, holding them accountable for their exercise, their sleep, their eating patterns, really, which are a lot of the fundamentals of, the behavior change that we do in longevity medicine now. But yeah, I was a little older. I was living in Australia, and there was one doctor that I met who was dabbling in that sort of world of longevity. I went to see him as a client, and I saw on his wall that he had some qualifications. And I said to him, could I have those qualifications? And he said, you can. You're a medical professional, you're a health professional, you could go and do these yourself. And that began the additional set of study, which then took quite some time. And then in the years intervening, I've slowly worked and moved my way into the field of longevity medicine, and now at Chi Longevity in Singapore. So I've been sort of actively practicing it for quite a long time, waiting for the groundswell to come, and then it's happened. So, in the last few years, it's become far more commonplace, and it was lovely to be able to say, I'm here, I've been here for a while.
Absolutely. And I would just second that, in that, like, I think it's really interesting how we're seeing movement towards a more proactive approach to how we look after clients and patients. And I think that's incredibly powerful. But it's not without its challenges, I'm sure we'll all agree. So a question to both of you, and actually, Chelsey, if you would want to go first, what would you say has been your biggest challenge about moving into longevity and actually breaking into that space?
I think that, to be truthful, there are a lot of barriers, if you will, and jumping into this space does require somebody to understand that there's barriers and be willing to go through them. I would say one of the largest challenges is, number one, understanding the science yourself so that you're able to articulate that to others. Because, when you get to know your craft really well, it becomes very easy to discuss this stuff. It doesn't matter if it's with colleagues or with patients. And then you jump into this new realm where you're starting to describe things on a totally different level that people really cannot see. And when they cannot see it, it's difficult to understand it. And that's probably been one of the biggest challenges, is just the going back to the science and understanding that and articulating that to other people so that they can sort of jump on board, if you will. The other one, that was easy for me because I consider myself a super nerd and this is my background. So and articulating is something that I love. And I think that's the gap that we're here to fill. So that, I want to say that's a massive challenge, just part of the job. And the other one is discussing the sort of advertising. I put advertising in quotations because we're still here to serve, but we're in the medical space still. And there's so many claims, and I call it noise and gray area out there, climbing through that. And then also not making large claims that we aren't able to back up. So there's a lot of noise in the diet space. There's a lot of noise in the exercise space. There's a lot of noise in the sleep space, the pharmaceutical space, and how to keep a clear message in the longevity realm while using evidence and real science has to make you you have to be very focused for that. And dealing with those regulatory advertising standards is not new to me. I've been doing this in my practice for a long time. I would say that's one of the biggest challenges, is just knowing what you can and cannot say sort of online. And I do believe each region has a different standard. I know that in Canada, we have very high regulations for our health advertising. And so that's been one of the challenge, but not one that we haven't been able to overcome.
Thank you, Chelsey. That's super insightful. And I think what you mentioned there is key. The fact that internationally, actually, so we probably have people from all over the world. And if you want to just drop in the chat where you're from, that would be great. But we probably have people from all over the world. And I do think that actually the standards and regulations can be quite different. And Dr. Naras, you're working in Singapore. What is it like there? And what's been the biggest challenge on that side of the world?
I think that from a Singapore perspective, interestingly, Singaporeans, because there's that sort of strong Eastern culture, they've been interested in longevity for a long time, but just from a different lens. However, what I would say is that people who are interested, you're going to need to be patient. This does take time. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of hype. But when it actually comes down to the nitty-gritty of having clients, seeing clients, we all still are going to have to do the work to get the credibility, to have the credibility, and to have the people come to you, because we're in a preventative medicine space now, and so one of the founders was saying that people don't come to see you because they've got a dose of bad health span. No, it's not like you have a health condition like heart disease and you're a cardiologist and people are just coming through to you. It's a different way of thinking. So you have to, I think, be prepared to be in it for the long haul. And as I said, you need to take small steps.
Absolutely. And so just to give people a bit of context, one of the reasons we at Glycanage decided to put this together is because we have a lot of interaction with a lot of people who are either early in their stage or actually quite far along. And one of the things that really comes up quite a lot is actually, how do I convince my patients that this is important? And I think it's for exactly the reasons that you've just said, right? If you are a patient who is unwell and you have a clinical condition, it stands to reason that you're going to go and seek help because that's typically affecting you in the now. But actually, when we're talking about longevity, sometimes we're actually talking about pretty healthy people. These people are not unwell. And actually what you're trying to do for them is optimize them. What you're trying to do is really help increase the gap between where they are and the potential of disease in the future. And that can be really difficult because it's a kind of forward thinking, different mindset completely. So a more challenging question for both of you, how do you go about convincing the people that you see that this is important and actually investing in their health? Chelsey, if you go first, and then
I think the first most fundamental thing is to live it and breathe it yourself. You are not able to discuss or describe or be passionate about something that you don't live and breathe. And I've been doing that since a teenager. I just didn't realize that I was doing it. But I remember thinking ahead and going, why am I going on this run? Why am I actually looking at my macronutrients? Why am I doing all of these things? And I actually really somehow innately believed in this 80-year-old version of myself that was living vitally. And it was like, it feels like a premonition today because this was pre all of my scientific education, but I just really believed in that. And so you have to live it and breathe it yourself. It is a personal journey that you have to go on. And then in my case, I actually have a wonderful platform where I already have a large group of patients that are already in the space looking at bettering themselves. And this has to do with the practitioner has to also help you believe in something that they cannot see. And for example, I'm in like cosmetic injectables was our primary focus. And you have to describe how this pharmaceutical actually goes in and works. And I was actually explaining it on a epigenomic level that actually we're altering things in a way that your wrinkles and your face will actually look different in 10 years if you had not had these interventions. And so I was already getting people to think way ahead at their future self. And so I have this platform of people who are already looking to better themselves. They're looking for a better version of themselves. And it feels actually really natural to have these conversations. The other thing is that we've started implementing in our intake forms a section that asks how are there other things that you might be interested in? And we list all of these longevity sort of keywords like menopause and sleep or weight loss, all of these things. And that becomes once you see that they're actually interested, it's quite wild to look at these intake forms now and see almost all of the boxes checked off in comparison to the cosmetic boxes where there's maybe one or two, but they're very interested in this. And so it creates this opportunity to have the discussion. So I feel very fortunate that I'm on a platform that my patients are very already willing to sort of pivot to this mindset, and they see how passionate I and our team are about this science. And it becomes a very interesting, passionate discussion. And then we go into, okay, what are the tools that we have to help you start getting into this? And once you feel that this is why it's so synonymous with cosmetic injectables or cosmetic medicine, is that once you feel a little bit of that power back, that control over aging, whereas we were looking at it from the outside in, and now we're just adjusting that we're looking at it from the inside out, it's a really powerful redirection of the conversation. So that's one of the main ways that we've been able to do that, and building trust with our patients and clients, that they actually come to us seeing that I'm involved with these things, and they come and they start asking in their appointments, tell me more about this. And what I think people will realize is that everyone wants a piece of it. Everyone wants to know more. Take that opportunity to have that conversation, and you'll find your way. You'll find that more people are approaching you to ask about longevity.
Absolutely, Nana. And I love that practical tip there about, actually, if you are in another area of health provision, asking the question. Sometimes people just simply need to be asked. I think sometimes there's a bit of an assumption that people don't care about this when no one's actually even bothered to ask the question. So I love that idea of having an intake form where you're actually asking people, are you interested in these areas of longevity, to really get kind of that market research in a way of what do people want and what can you provide that would be helpful for the people that you're already seeing. Dr. Naras, I'd love to hear from you as well, what you're doing to kind of really convince the people you're seeing.
So I think fortunately, we're all lucky that in the last year or two, longevity as a concept has kind of gone gangbusters. You only need to look at Netflix, what's going on in our Instagram feeds and Facebook feeds. So people are already being bombarded with the concept. So I think, first of all, that's quite good that at least there really is far more interest than there was even a year or two. And then second, when you do first start talking to people, is right from an early point is ask them what their goals are, because people's sort of intentions for longevity differ. And I think right from that outset to have a good understanding of what their goals are, to align yourself with those goals. And then second to that, you then may find that you may need to help them change their mindset somewhat, because you need to have that mindset shift in order for them to then buy in, essentially, and then feel that this is the right path for them. So I think you've got to get that very, very early.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and I think Chelsey mentioned this earlier as well, I think that language piece is so important when you're talking about something that is quite difficult to understand for a lot of people. And of course, the hope is that eventually this will become very mainstream. I think it's already happening, but actually having the right language is core. I think that comes from hopefully joining things like this, webinars, where you get to hear from people who are doing it, figuring out how you use your language to kind of explain to someone that maybe some of the things they're doing are not the best for them, and maybe they need to change suit a little bit. Because certainly that has been my experience sometimes, where you meet people who are doing lots and lots of interventions. Sometimes some of them may not be the best thing for them, or we're seeing that maybe it's causing issues on the inflammation and having to kind of make that change. But
can I just
yes,
add
that
you need to, I think at the end of that discussion, the mindset thing is one thing, you do achieve that through discussing it, but then you have to actually offer something. So we could have these great discussions and you could actually feel euphoric. I remember feeling euphoric that we have these insights now, but then what? And here are the tools that we have now to measure, and it just brings them from, it actually completes the mindset shift, because everybody starts to doubt. They start to say, okay, well, what if, because this is medicine 2.0 thinking, right? It's very repressive, and we start to go backwards. But if you can have this discussion, you can tell when they're locked in and they're like, I want to know more, because I've had this conversation hundreds, thousands of times with people. And then you say that these are the tools. And they're like, okay, so we've arrived at this place now that we can actually measure these things. And that's, I see the mindset shift completely at that moment, because their disbelief turns into somewhat of belief. And so that's a key moment in that conversation, I find. Absolutely, it's the mindset as well. Yes, absolutely. And the actionable steps is what gets the person who doesn't understand a lot about this to start thinking, okay, I believe you now. Let's talk some more. Sorry.
Absolutely. No, no, I completely agree. And actually, shameless plug here, I will say that one of the reasons why I think Glycanage can be such a useful tool is that ability to show people. So exactly correct. This concept of being able to say to someone, okay, these are the areas that you need to work on, or these are the areas of your health that we want to optimize and focus on. But then you really need to be able to provide some sort of tool or way to do that, or path towards improvement. Because actually, if you tell someone, they are from a biological age point of view, they're a lot older than their chronological age. The first question is, how do I change that? How do I make this better? Right? You don't want to just be giving people static news that they can't change. It's all about pairing it with an actionable step that will actually help them on their journey.
Absolutely.
Now this actually, go ahead, Chelsey.
So sorry, I get so excited about this. But glycan age, I'll just be honest on this global platform that it was the lock and key for me that okay, these are the insights that I require to fully jump in with 2 feet and be able to offer it to people around me. So glycan age was that for me, those insights.
Exactly.
And then the next step is that people you to question, well, how valid is this test, et cetera. And I love describing that we've actually already been doing this for a long time. We've been looking at genetic testing, pre-screening for things such as, for example, breast cancer screening. We've been looking at these genes for a long time and comparing this person who might have this gene, to a subset of people. And that's been part of medicine 2.0, I quote, for a long time. So this is like, it's new and it's amazing, but actually, so there are so many ways you can go about describing these actionable steps. And I will just say glycan age was it for me personally.
And I'm super glad to hear that, because obviously, you know, a large part of what I'm doing is trying to educate people on how to use glycan age within to actually help their clients, because it's all about, you know, when we are thinking about behavior change, which some of this tends to be, or interventions, having that proof of concept is really important, and actually having a test to show people can be really important. As an example, if you're trying to control a patient's blood pressure, you're going to measure their blood pressure, right? Whereas with longevity, it can be difficult to find those tools, and so that's can be really helpful. Now, we've spoken a little bit about some of the tools and this concept of having actionable steps and tools. But one of the things we've discussed is how saturated the longevity market is, with lots of great stuff, but also some snake oil. How do you guys identify what is the right thing to use? What do you do to kind of validate that this tool is what I want to bring into my practice and what I want to use with my patients? Dr. Naras, if you want to jump in first.
Well, I'd say from an outset, so our clinic, we are a longevity medicine clinic, and in Singapore and quite possibly in Asia, we're the first evidence-based, science-driven clinic of its type. So just even in the title itself, it says something, is that we use evidence as our base point to start everything. And then we've been very fortunate that we have a leader in the field, Professor Andrea Meyer, who has helped steer the entire process from top to bottom. She's an academic, she's a medical doctor, and she's been in that sort of gerontology field for a very long time. So I think the first point that's very important is you need to understand hierarchy of evidence, levels of evidence, and be able to look when you see at various technologies or things that have been introduced, where does it sit on that pyramid? And if it's sitting very low on the pyramid, or the data that you're getting is only in animal studies, have we seen it translate across to humans yet? If we see that the studies have been shown in humans, what level of trials are they? Understand the types of trials and the strengths and weaknesses of these different ones. You've got to have some kind of level of savvy on this front so that you know where your interventions stand. You can also look further. You can see some of these technologies. Are they validated? Are they validated in certain populations or not? And then that also then helps you in your decision making. So I think that's a very, very important start point.
Absolutely. And I actually just wanted to say that, like, I think it's really important not to underestimate the importance of looking at evidence and being curious about what the research actually says. There is a lot of marketing that's happening in this space to push things that maybe do not have that clinical evidence and validation. And my theory, or what we've seen actually in this space, is that those who are pushing things that are not evidence-based are getting revealed or getting exposed. And so I cannot stress enough the importance of becoming quite curious about, actually, you know, someone says that this is a good thing, but actually what does the research say and how strong is the research behind it? I do think that in the longevity space, sorry, I'm becoming a bit of a panelist myself instead of the host, but I do just want to say this. I do think that there is a temptation, I guess, to kind of just read about something and being like, oh yeah, I'm going to start introducing this. But actually, you know, there are still things that are being tested and trialed. And I think we have to be super, super clear with clients and people who are treating that actually maybe the evidence is still not fully there. So even if someone comes to, we've had people who come to us who are doing things that maybe are not for the best. And ultimately people are going to do what they want to do. But much of the time they're coming to you as the person who maybe has some expertise. So having that evidence kind of in your mind and being able to educate and share what I think can still be super helpful for those individuals. But yeah, I'll pass on to Chelsey now.
I would just want to echo all of that. And I actually feel a professional at sorting out evidence-based, because at the Cosmetic Clinic, we're in our own lane. I have yet to know of another company that values evidence-based so much. Our actual slogan is the Cosmetic Clinic, your beauty, our science. So everything that we do, even in the cosmetic injectable world, has to be backed by science, hard evidence, random controlled trials. We really groom the literature before we bring on a treatment, whether or not it's Health Canada approved. We don't actually offer anything that is not Health Canada approved, but even if it is, we groom the science, and we've actually gone through many iterations of the actual pharmaceuticals that we offer. We have discontinued some of them because I didn't believe that the science was there enough, or we're in the science world, things are constantly evolving, and better science, better information comes about that replaces old. And so you have to get into that mind frame of not just, yeah, absolutely, you said being curious. So, knowing how to read a paper, how to look at this stuff has become part of it's been a juggernaut. It's been difficult sometimes, but you have to know how to read that. And in the nursing world, when I went from the biology world into the nursing world, one of my biggest challenges was going from highly quantitative data to qualitative data, and knowing that hierarchy of evidence, and really trying to, honestly, I still struggle with that today. I'm getting my master's and I'm doing a research course right now, is pulling this data into high significant difference and p-values and all these beautiful things that we have at our disposal, but most people don't understand them. And we have a real issue in the cosmetic injectable world where there's tons of snake oil. And how do we groom through all of that and keep clear and focused has been our expertise in our clinics. That's what we do. And so we just do the same thing in longevity. We're like, okay, what makes sense? We go to the literature. There have already been some evolutions of what had maybe made a lot of sense 10 years ago, has a little bit of validity issues today, not with the glycan age, but with some other things. And so it's just staying curious. It's grooming your way. I'm looking like I'm swimming right now, but you kind of are swimming in a sea of information, and knowing how to approach that, read a good paper, compare it to others, understand the strength of some of that evidence. If it's a single paper, then perhaps it needs more. And data in numbers really speaks a lot volumes. So it's really staying evidence-based for us as well. And of course, I don't offer anything that I don't personally trial myself and see the successes with.
Yeah, and I think that's Dr. Naras, do you want to jump in?
I was just going to say one more thing. One thing also is to know the evidence, but also have a good idea who the real players are in this field, because you're going to come across people who might have very good marketing skills, or they're very good at communicating, but are they actually the real players? So spend some time, understand and identify who the people are that are doing the real work, or who are doing the real research, and follow them. Get their levels of education. Just be careful where you're getting your information from.
And I think that makes, sorry. I just think that makes our job, if you would agree, Dr. Naras, that much harder, that once we gain that trust with our patient population, that we also have to syndicate and collaborate with the people that we believe are those key players. So it makes the stakes are high, because we have to collaborate with those people. We have to know who they are. We have to understand that aspect so that we can maintain the trust of our patients. I totally agree with you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, guys. I did want to just ask another question around, how we actually go about setting up programs, because I think one of the biggest challenges, at Glycan Age, we have this really big ethos around testing to understand where someone begins their journey, and then implementing interventions, and then retesting. That is core to understanding how someone is responding. And one of the reasons for this is because we have to recognize that no patient or individual is the same. With longevity, from my perspective, also becomes the concept of personalized medicine, precision medicine, looking at an individual as opposed to a cohort of people. And actually that requires a slightly different approach. And so my question was going to be, how do you guys build that into any kind of programs that you have for your clients? What kind of steps do you take to really focus on the individual and make the interventions you use personalized to them?
I'll start. So I think from our perspective, at least, at our clinic, we invest an awful lot of time in assessments and diagnostics. So we try to find as much information from our clients as we can, whether it is through detailed questionnaires, but also them being in the clinic and having a significant number of diagnostic tests. So we have tests that can diagnose disease, but we can also have lots of assessments as well, which are going to help understand people's different states of health at a physiological level, at an organ level, and now, of course, we can look at it from that biological aging level and in the introduction of the different types of biological clocks, of course, of which glycan age is one of them. So I think that the more information that you're able to gather, the better. And again, it doesn't just have to be limited to blood markers, diagnostic tests. You've got to think also about mental health, cognition, social connection. These things also become very important frameworks. And if you're going to take a holistic view, you need to look at it from all of those fronts.
I totally.
Go ahead, Chelsey. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in that. So you've been doing this for 10 years and I have not been doing it for quite that long. Personally, I have, but so in our business, I'm going to just speak for all the people who are looking to get into it, who are looking to step their toes into it, who are fearful, might be a little bit intimidated by Dr. Naras, that have been doing it for 10 years, has a lot figured out. And really, I just want to encourage others that are thinking about this to start at a biohacking level. The power, the feeling of looking at some of these things inside your own body is an incredibly powerful feeling. And that is a very simple, cost-effective way to start in your business, is to start partnering with people like Age and other companies that can really look into and sort of, if you quote unquote biohack, I know it's a kind of a questionable term, but you really are just looking into your body as to, okay, what is here? Well, how can I make sense of it with my patients? And so some of those things might be how you start. And that is exactly how we started. Now, I've got 3 phases of my business model that we're going through. I'm so proud to say, actually, we just announced it yesterday, but we're opening our 4th location, our flagship location in the capital of Canada. It will be our capital's first longevity center. It's the largest of our locations, and we're really focusing a portion of that square footage to longevity. So we'll be moving into phase 2, which is that more collaborative approach. But for those of you starting, look at the ways that you can biohack. And if I could just make a little disclaimer, or just say, nurses are the original biohackers. For so long, we've been looking at vitals, temperature, pulse, respirations, blood pressure. Those were the first ways that we were actually able to look inside the body at a physiological level to understand what was going on. So for those of you who might be afraid and saying, I don't know how to do this, no, you absolutely know how to do this. It's in your fundamental nature to look inside the body and determine what is going on. And so there are several ways to biohack. Just know that there are some that give really good insights and some that maybe not so much, but Glycan Age is a great place to start. And so several phases is the way that I look at it. And when I look at my business as growing in several phases, I know exactly what each phase is going to be. But the longevity science space is growing so vastly. Our literature is being pumped out at a wonderful rate. More money, private money, is going into research, longevity science. And that's a great opportunity to actually implement new things at new stages. So I know that there will be more information and iterations. So as I move into phase 2, I'm quite sure things will change and the assessments and tools will change, and we'll add those at that time. And we move to phase 3, there'll be even more. So it gives me, in my mind, an opportunity to grow. So if you're feeling a little bit intimidated by getting from A to Z, just focus on getting A to B and start having those discussions with your patients through some biohacking tools will get you really comfortable with it so that you can move on.
Absolutely. And I just want to add to that. So Chelsey, you made this really great point about nurses being the original biohackers. Completely unrelated. I'm currently reading a book, and if anyone is interested in reading it, it's called Checklist by Atul Gawande, and he speaks a lot about really complex industries. And he's a general surgeon by background, but has moved out of that now. And he speaks a lot around really complex, the big complexities that you find in healthcare, right? If anyone has worked in healthcare, we know how complicated it can be and how challenging it can be. And the whole concept behind this book is this idea about having frameworks and checklists, and how health is complicated, longevity is very complicated, and actually having some sort of framework or checklist as to how you're going to move through assessing a patient can be really, really helpful. And I think there are so many practices that you may already have from your original practice or what you're doing already in practice that you can actually directly apply to longevity. And so I don't think people should be so intimidated by it. In actual fact, I think they should try and see this as an opportunity to kind of supplant what they already have, the knowledge and the experience they already have, into something that could actually be more beneficial to clients, because it's that proactive acting and caring for clients. But I did just want to kind of summarize some of the things we've said here, because there's a lot of information, a lot of wisdom, I think. But it sounds like what we're saying is, the step, it's around education and conversation, right? Just open the door to people to have that chat, to have that discussion about what longevity is, what does it mean to them, what are the things they're most interested in. And if you are someone who has a bit more of a maybe slightly more commercial background, then this is your market research. It's speaking to people to understand what it is that they want and what it is they need, and then educating them. And I think with that education piece comes that evidence-based and understanding the research and really learning. And just to say, I think one of the things that you can do maybe practically that could be helpful is there are a lot of conferences that are happening. It can be kind of challenging to know which ones are the best ones, but even just doing a quick search of some of the people who are speaking at these conferences can be a great way to just kind of build up your network of who is in longevity, who is speaking. Probably following these lovely people who are on the call today would also be a great start, and really help you build kind of that network around longevity. Okay. Yes, Dr. Naras, you want to say something?
You said something about education, and I think that building your own level of education is also quite good, because I think the more that you understand yourself, the better. And there are some really valuable resources out there. So everyone here can do the longevity medicine course. So the longevity medicine course, there's the Longevity Medicine 101 from Longevity Education. It's free. It's very detailed. It's in English as well as Chinese. You'll learn a lot from that front. You could join the Healthy Longevity Medicine Society. The National University of Singapore have a Healthy Longevity series that you can find on YouTube. And every week, Professor Brian Kennedy, also Professor Meyer, have a new guest. You're going to meet the people that are the players in this field when you listen to these people or see these people talk, and then you're going to build your own level of education up as well.
And actually, yes, I would 100% agree. The Longevity 101 education piece, which is, I think it was directed by someone called Dr. Evelyn Bishkoff, is a great place to start. It is free, and I think they're trying to translate it into a number of different languages. So for people who are looking for a place to start, it is a great place to just get that beginning base level. 100% agree. We do have quite a few questions coming from the floor, so I do want to hand over. But before I do that, I did want to ask both of you one question, which is, where do you see the longevity space going in sort of the next 10, 20 might be a bit too far. Let's say the next decade. What do you think the big innovations are going to be? Where do you see this field going? And what are you most excited about? It's a three-part question, sorry. Chelsey, do you want to jump in first? I see you nodding.
Sure, yeah. I think I can mostly envision, I have strong conviction in myself. So I mostly see where I am. And I believe that in 10 years, there will be such a voice through reaching so many patients. I have this kind of thought of the sort of 6 degrees of separation. For every patient that we help, they'll spread the longevity message to, I'm seeing other people, and that will really help spread the message. And I think in 10 years time, we'll be at the point that we'll have so much data, so much energy and inertia behind us through us doing it privately, that the governments, especially I'm over here in the Western world, we have a real epidemic of unhealthy behaviors. And I think that inertia will be starting to force our governments to open their eyes to actually make and incorporate changes into the policy itself and into our health systems. And I think that in 10 years' time, because of everything that we are doing now for the next decade, we'll start to see those changes. And I hope that we start to see that more prevention happen on the mass level. And so all I do is I hope that with our actions, of course, that will be the case in 10 years. And some of the innovations, I don't know. I felt like I premonitioned some of this when I was in my teenage years, and so we're having it now. So I have to probably think some more about what that will look like in another lifetime or another couple of decades. But I think that we'll be in a healthier space because prevention will be a word that people understand, regardless of whether they can physically see it or not. The articulation will have been there. The education will be stronger. And I just see a healthier population. That's my hope for the future. The innovation, I'm going to leave that to the scientists, and I'll be there catching it as the funnel and trying to bridge the gap between what's going on in the science world, what are we finding, and the masses of people. You're gonna find me right here trying to bridge that gap and bring it to the people. That's sort of where I'll be. But I'll leave the real science to the scientists.
Thank you, Chelsey. Dr. Naras, what are your thoughts?
Well, so we also have to remember we are moving into a world very soon where it's going to be, it's an aging society now. Like countries like Singapore, which is very similar to many, I think in the next 5 or 6 years, a quarter of our population is going to be over 65 years old. So we have these many of the people that we're talking to now are living in similar nations that are under that same circumstance. Our birth rates are dropping. And so there's going to be huge imperatives on healthy aging coming from many sectors, from government, from private sector, because this is going to affect all of us. So first of all, there is going to be an enormous amount of effort and work on this front. And second to that is, I think with respect to technology, we're right on the precipice at the moment. I don't think we have any idea of what's going to happen in the next 2, 3, or 5 years when it comes to the large language models, the huge amounts of data sets that we're going to have, and the kinds of breakthroughs that are inevitably going to come from the funding and from the interest in this sphere. So right from, as I said, the personal through to population level. So an awful lot of things are going to be happening. It's going to be very, very exciting. It's going to be very, very interesting.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
As the data sets get larger, I wrote down the word precision that you said earlier, Dr. Simi, that precision is probably the future, that these large data sets will change everything. You're right, I don't quite understand I said inertia, but we probably don't understand the magnitude.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the intersection of tech and health has been growing for a very, very long time. I think it's going to continue to grow. And both of you actually mentioned really a public health challenge there, which is this concept of grow in some ways globally growing population, aging population, where actually I don't think longevity and preventative approaches to healthcare are going to be an option. They're going to be a necessity. The problems are growing a lot faster than the people who can handle them, and so it's going to become increasingly important that we have a more proactive approach to healthcare so that we can deal with that challenge of healthcare. And that's me speaking as Dr. Simi, not even for glycanase, just for myself, that I think this is going to be incredibly important. So thank you both so much for that wonderful and really enlightening conversation. I hope it's been super helpful to everyone in the chat. What I'm going to do now, getting some really great feedback in the chat. Thank you everyone who's offering their comments. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to open the Q&A. So some people already had some questions. So I'm just going to go through those. So the first question we have is actually directly to Chelsey from Monica, which says, "Hi Chelsey, will you be able to share your web link so that I can have an idea of the content you are sharing with your clients? I'm based in the UK." think?
Yes. I speak mostly on my Instagram handle about actually probably could be doing a lot more, which I will be doing a lot more. And it's Nurse Chelsey the Cosmetic Clinic on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn under the same name. And our company, which you're going to see a nice change over working behind the scenes, is the Cosmetic Clinic, but it's .ca because we are in Canada. And I'd be happy to find you over there.
Yeah, and we can make sure that we share. So if you're happy to, Chelsey, we'll make sure we share some of the handles so that people can follow as well. Another question, which was for Chelsey as well, which was around, I think you spoke earlier about platforms that you're using to discuss with your clients and patients. Someone was asking, what platforms are you using to have these discussions?
So I think what I was talking about at that moment was that I have this platform. It's sort of a figmented platform in terms of like, what do I have in its entirety were my groupings of patients. But the platform that we use for intake forms is we use a software if they wanted to send me an email. I hope I answered that question, but the platform we use to actually collect the data is a software, and it's the same as our documentation. All of our medical health records go in there and that sort of thing. But what I meant was I have this platform that I'm using the patients that are kind of already there to use them as a demographic to pivot the conversation. I hope that answers the question.
Amazing. Yeah, I think so. The next question is around menopause specifically, which is interesting because this is an area of interest for me. And what I've seen is that it's really becoming a bit of a force actually in this space, because for a long time I think there's been a lot of taboo around HRT and various hormone therapies. And obviously, menopause is something that all women typically go through at some point. And actually, there's been maybe a lack of clinical guidance on that. And so the question that was asked, I'm going to rephrase a little bit, but ultimately was saying that the biological age was a lot higher than the chronological age, likely because of menopause, and that person was recommended HRT. Now, I need to be very clear: we are not here as clinicians to give advice to give it clinical advice. So big disclaimer there. But it would be interesting, I guess, to hear from you guys what your thoughts are on hormone therapies, and if it's something that you guys have been using in your practice.
I might speak first because I think that Dr. Naras will have more of the assessment side of things. But I mean, when patients come in, we've talked about this for years and years, maybe not in the hormone replacement category or longevity science, but most of our patients come to us in that era, pre-menopause, because they're noticing signs of aging so vastly. And when we know that it makes sense that in 6 months of it being in menopause, we age a great amount of time, what if we don't need to have that endocrinological upset be so vast and drastic during a certain period? If we could actually titrate and keep those levels a little bit more even, are we going to age at that accelerated rate? I think we know the answer to that, and keep actually ultimately patients more comfortable in their own body. It is, again, another form of biohacking, but my take on it is that it's a wonderful thing. And that's phase 2 for us in our business. I'll defer over to Dr. Naras, but absolutely. And we've been keyed and locked into this for so long in the cosmetic space, and helping people understand aging from a hormone level that there's no denying that drastic aging happens during these levels of changes of hormones, including childbearing years. We also see a lot of patients come in right after that. So I will defer, but I think it's already massive, and it's really an important thing to look at.
So at Chi Longevity, our initial screening questionnaires, from the medical questions at least, have a significant section that's allocated towards women's health, in particular perimenopause and menopause. So we, in our data collection, we already see and understand the status of somebody. And then depending on the way they answer those questions, then our blood tests might be timed at different times. So somebody who would normally come in for a random blood test, we now may be saying, well, we want to find where you are in your cycle, for example, and we're going to identify best time to do blood tests, so that the data that we then collect is going to be very personal to that woman what stage of life she is at. And then, as we would with any condition, we want to build up the information. And so, the blood biodata, the questionnaires, the other information that we gather is all built into a big picture. A multidisciplinary team is then brought together to discuss that, and then whether somebody should or should not take hormone replacement therapy is going to be brought up in that place. So you only make these sorts of decisions when you have the full picture in front of you. And then again, then it's a medical decision, and it's then how do you go about doing it.
Mm-hmm. And can I jump? You said the word controversial, Dr. Simi, that, that I think as longevity clinicians, that's a word we're going to have to face a lot. And so we have to wrap our heads around that. But there is no denying that, of course, there's controversial aspects. I'll speak just about my own country. There's a dichotomy between clinicians who offer hormone therapy and those who don't. We all know that there was a time in history where everything was sort of retracted and we didn't know if we should be doing that anymore. And so there's two groupings of clinicians that either believe in it or don't. And longevity, we're kind of stuck, we have to work ourselves through that controversy. And then there's also a dichotomy within the clinicians that do it themselves in Canada. We've got the naturopaths and we've got the general practitioners, and might I just say that they maybe don't work together so well in my country. And that's where we come in and we sort of cloud out the controversy and say, no, this might be something really important that we could focus on women's health. We could really make some changes in some people's lives. And the other thing we can't deny is that every other patient that sits in my chair that is not there for longevity science or treatments, they're there for cosmetic treatments, they are inevitably discussing this with me within 5 minutes of being in the chair. So it is part of so many women's lives, and they're either being denied or they're curious. And navigating through that space will be really important in longevity clinics. But yes, I just want to say that tackling the controversy, we have to start talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just, so for anyone who does follow Glycanage quite a lot, we did actually do a webinar on this, and you can check that out on our YouTube channel, which has specifically a talk around estrogen and Glycanage and how that can be used. But one thing I will say, and this is again my own opinion, especially in the space of longevity, sometimes the research is ahead of regulation. And what I mean by that is simply, for example, in the UK, we know that there are certain hormone therapies that are not indicated for various therapies. And what we're finding, or certainly what I'm seeing in the research I'm doing, is that there is very clear evidence about the importance of hormone therapy. And of course, it's not for everybody. It has to be a clinical decision. You have to weigh up what's going on with the patient. As Dr. Naras said, there has to be this movement towards understanding what's happening in your patient. But I do think the point that was made earlier around the importance of being able to decipher and understand research becomes really important in longevity, because there are many things that are kind of ahead of their time, where there isn't clear framework or regulation. And actually it comes down to us who maybe are looking at providing that, to actually do that due diligence and understand it and be able to educate and discuss it with our clients. And I think that comes down, that is just as true in menopause as it is with anything else. So I think that's very important and something that we should all consider and think about. There are a couple questions here which are specifically about Glycanage. Can I just a quick question for the team? Sorry, just bear with me a moment. I've got someone at the door.
Mm-hmm. I was worried that was going to be me. I said to my son, he's home now for the summer months, and I said, just be quiet, and if anybody's at the door, you got to shush them.
Sorry about that, everyone. My apologies. So I was just going to ask a question around Glycanage, because we had a few questions in the Q&A around how can you use Glycanage in your practice. I can give some information on this, but I think it's best actually to give the floor to the people who are using it. So if you guys want to speak a little bit about how you're using Glycanage in practice and how it's been useful to your clients.
Chelsey?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first of all, you've got to do it yourself. Doing the test and getting the results and finding out that my age after some Interventions was the age of 20. I'm going to be 37 this year, and so that you have to do it yourself, and then you have an idea of what kind of information you can get. Just the biological age itself is an imperative piece of data, and so you can offer that as a treatment. And we actually have an intake form. Again, I talk about these regulations and the rules about advertising, and so we have a disclaimer that we're not. This is not a diagnosis. This age, what have you. And so we have an intake form, and people can sign up for just the biological age themselves. And then we also have a program that we're developing that can work through that with them. So you kind of have an a la carte offering, and then we also have a process offering. And that's sort of what we do. I'll let you, I'm curious to know what you do, Dr. Naras, with GlycanAge.
So what we do is our clients that are doing, we'll say, our full journey with us, we actually use 5 different biological clocks, because as we would all know, we don't all age at one rate in every single organ and every system. And so ultimately, I think when it comes to longevity medicine in the future, people are going to look at many clocks. You'll know your biological age of your eyes or of your heart, etc. So we look at a lot of different clocks, and one of them will be the GlycanAge clock. But then we also then integrate the information that we get from the GlycanAge clock, because you get so much information from that. And Dr. Simi might sort of share that you've got new iterations of yours now, where when you have this clock, you're also comparing against lots of other different disease states as well. And you're getting to see these significant overlaps with other inflammatory disease. So you get information of your biological age. You're also getting a lot more supporting information. And then with us, at least, we then relate that information back to the different organ systems and physiological systems to then give a good interpretation and then decide what is the most appropriate action plan. So I think, in summary, we don't look at one clock, we look at many, and the Glycan clock is one that we use to give us good information with respect to immune function and inflammation.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Naras. We've got 4 minutes left, so I'm going to give a very brief little talk about GlycanAge, because there are a lot of questions about it, which I will kind of go through now. And then we'll kind of close with hopefully some top tips from Dr. Naras and Chelsey around what they would advise people who are trying to sort of break into that longevity space. So in terms of GlycanAge, just as a really brief kind of description. So Dr. Naras is completely correct. Aging can happen in lots of different ways in the human body. It's not linear. It happens through kind of many different biological processes. In particular, at GlycanAge, we focus on looking at inflammation, chronic inflammation to be specific. And the reason for this is because it is well known and well documented that chronic inflammation, as it builds, or systemic inflammation, same thing, they can increase your risk of chronic disease. And actually, if we're talking about being preventative, which is really what we want to see, we don't want to wait for someone to be sick. We want to move them away from that. Then what you really need is a biomarker that's able to change early before disease happens. And that really is our core focus. So in terms of the report we provide to practitioners and people who are using the report in practice, it is broken into 3 different parts. There is the biological age, which I think is valuable to help people understand where they are on their journey. But actually, I always say that the biological age is not helpful unless you can understand why it's high or why it's low and what you can do about it. And so that is further broken down in the glycan indexes. And those indexes kind of give information about what areas of health this person needs to focus on. So whether that's diet, nutrition, if it's more their physical body composition, if it's the health, or if it's the cardiovascular health. And those are the kind of breakdowns that you get. And then the third and final part is what Dr. Naras just mentioned, which is that disease association bit, where we focus on what diseases this person might be at higher risk of because of their inflammation profile. So to end us off, I'm just going to ask both Chelsey and Dr. Naras for their opinions or their thoughts on what piece of advice would you give to someone who is looking at breaking into that longevity space? Give one key thing that you think they really need to focus on, they really need to do to get into that space effectively.
First, you need to surround yourself with the knowledge, the technology, and what's out there, and really grow your belief in this as the future. And I would also say, keep checkpoints, because if you're entering this space, there is such a thing now with the vast amounts of technology and social media that can make you feel like you're knocked down a little bit. And so there's this imposter syndrome that occurs. And this is just from clinician to clinician that you need to maintain your trust and belief, because it can wane with the vast amounts of knowledge out there. But you go find and learn and go through some of these things yourself if this is your starting point, and stay true that North Star, that this is the way forward, and don't let go of that, because that's where maybe your motivation to jump into this space might wane. So keep that North Star strong, that this is the future, this is where it's going, it's not going anywhere. And if you deny it, you will be left in the dust. So I would just, that if I could just give one piece of advice, it's sort of surround yourself in the knowledge and the science happening around this, and stay true to that belief, and check yourself when that imposter syndrome starts to come in.
Couldn't agree more. Dr. Naras?
And I think that become a subject matter expert. So be very confident yourself, build your own education. If you are able to build education for yourself and then actually have credibility, because if you have credibility, you're going to last. Make sure that you then surround yourself with the people that are also credible, and then you'll have that strong network.
Amazing. I completely agree. We did have some other questions in the Q&A, but we don't quite have time just because we've run out. Clearly, there's a need for another webinar, so maybe we'll organize one, especially around the business side. Initial investment profitability seems to be something of interest. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who was able to join today. I'm really sorry we didn't get to all the questions. Any questions that have been asked that haven't been able to be answered now, what we'll do is we'll try and put together some answers to send out. So please don't feel like we're ignoring your question. But I hope this has been helpful. Chelsey, Dr. Naras, thank you so much for your time today. It is such an honor to hear from people who have been doing this, who have really already gone through that journey and are able to give advice to people who are just starting out. I think we're all on the same page, and we really want to make a change in this space and really push this agenda forward, because it is important for our population at large. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.